Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here to take your source material and, well, really get to the heart of what you need to know. Today, we are diving into the really dynamic world of Japanese expatriates. It's constantly shifting. We're looking at material called Shifting Sands: Japanese Expats Reevaluate Life in Asia Amidst Changing Trends. For a long time, the picture was pretty clear. The salaryman sent abroad by the company, maybe the family came too. But the sources we're looking at suggest that whole story is changing and fast. We're seeing basically two big opposing forces shaping this population now. We need to understand the push that's companies bringing people home, and also the pull, these economic factors bringing in a whole new, wealthier group.
Right, it's a transformation. Definitely not just a simple decline. Because if you just glance at the headline numbers, you might think, okay, fewer Japanese people living abroad, end of story. But when you look closer at the data, you see it's more complex. One type of expat is leaving, yes, but another type, often with more economic clout, is actually growing. They're reshaping the communities. It's a real shift in the center of gravity, you could say, for the Japanese diaspora.
Okay, right. Let's unpack that. Let's start with the first part, the retreat, the corporate retreat. The sources are pretty clear. There's a noticeable drop in traditional Japanese expat numbers. And Southeast Asia gets mentioned a lot, especially Thailand. That seems to be a key area.
Yeah, Thailand's a prime example. And this isn't happening by accident. It's a deliberate corporate strategy. Companies have basically figured out that sending a Japanese manager over, paying all the allowances, the international school fees, it's just not always necessary anymore, or frankly, the best approach strategically.
Ah,
So, like Nikki Asia points out, companies are really leaning into localization now. That means promoting local managers who, you know, already get the market, the culture, the customers.
makes sense.
The cost savings are obviously huge, but it's more than that.
Yeah.
Often, local teams are just better, more agile. They don't need someone flown in from Tokyo. So those automatic corporate rotations, they're definitely becoming less common.
That makes a lot of sense purely from a business perspective. But you mentioned social factors, too. The sources touch on that.
They do, yeah. And it adds another layer to this. Think about dual-income couples in Japan today.
Right.
Both partners often have significant careers. So an overseas posting means one person likely has to pause or sacrifice their career. Or, the couple faces years of long-distance living. That's a big ask.
A huge deterrent, I'd imagine.
It really is. And it just adds to the reluctance around these overseas assignments. It contributes to that thinning out we see in places like Thailand or Singapore.
And are companies trying to, offer new incentives to overcome that? Or is it
I
just
think that's accepted. It seems mostly accepted, honestly. The push towards localization is the stronger trend. If finding a Japanese manager willing to move is difficult, they seem more inclined to just invest further in the local team. That old corporate safety net, the one that made these moves almost automatic, it's definitely fraying.
Okay, so corporate strategy is pushing people out, or rather, keeping them in Japan. What about other pressures? Because the data suggests this isn't just Southeast Asia, right? It's a wider trend of repatriation, people returning to Japan. The overall number of Japanese living abroad, which was growing for ages, has actually started to dip.
That's right. And the big driver there seems to be cost, simple economics. The South China Morning Post highlighted this rising living costs, general economic pressures. It's pushing even long-term residents in traditionally popular but expensive cities to think about going back.
Like where, for example?
Well, they mentioned places like Shanghai, even New York City.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Think about it. Currency swings can hit expats hard.
Mm.
And the cost of housing, international schools, it's just shot up in many global hubs, especially after the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Japan, by comparison, might suddenly look more stable, maybe even cheaper, especially compared to, say, coastal China or Manhattan right now.
Mm-hmm.
So for families who've been abroad a while, the financial argument to go back home can become pretty compelling.
So the traditional reasons for staying abroad are weakening. But interestingly, even as these big hubs shrink a bit, you mentioned the footprint is changing shape. The sources noted increases in Japanese folks moving to places we might not immediately think of, like Africa, the Middle East.
Yeah, and Central America, Oceania too.
Yeah.
It's subtle, but it's there. It's likely connected to different kinds of economic activity, maybe resource development, big infrastructure projects. These often need smaller, more specialized teams, not the large-scale corporate offices of the past.
Right.
So while the total number abroad might dip, the distribution is becoming, well, more spread out, more diverse. It reflects where global growth is happening now.
Okay, this is fascinating. It sets up this contradiction almost. Because if corporate postings are down and costs are pushing people back home, Who are these other Japanese expats moving abroad? The ones attracting financial services?
Exactly. This is the pivot point.
Yeah.
We shift from talking about the corporate masses to talking about independent wealth migration, and we have a clear example from the sources. Financial institutions changing their strategy.
Okay.
They're not just chasing fewer salarymen. They're following the money. Daiwa Securities, for example.
Wow.
They're actually expanding in Southeast Asia, opening new offices, like in Thailand.
But who are they serving then?
Not the traditional corporate expat who's maybe leaving. They are specifically targeting high net worth Japanese individuals, people who've chosen to move to the region on their own terms, often bringing significant assets with them.
Huh. High net worth individuals. But is that enough people to really make a difference
Yeah.
compared to the corporate folks leaving?
Well, in terms of sheer numbers, no, probably not replacing the volume completely. But in terms of strategic focus and economic impact, it's a huge shift. Think about it. The corporate expat was often temporary, maybe 3 to 5 years. These affluent individuals relocating might be doing so more permanently. They're invested,
Okay, I see.
and they need different services, right? Sophisticated wealth management, tax advice for the new situation, cross-border investment help. So Daiwa setting up shop like this, it signals a major strategic adjustment. Companies aren't abandoning Asia. They're recognizing the growth market now isn't corporate logistics. It's managing private independent wealth.
So the whole profile of the typical Japanese expat is changing.
Fundamentally, from that temporary assignment model towards something more permanent, more based on individual wealth. It's a real tectonic shift, as you said.
We've talked a lot about companies and money. What about the people themselves living through these changes? If the old corporate structures that provided community are fading, what takes their place? How do people connect?
That's such a crucial question. Because adapting to a new place, a new culture, it's hard. You need that support network. You need that shared identity, especially if the office isn't the automatic social center anymore. You need, like, a new anchor.
And the source material had this really great specific example that brought this to life, the rugby tournament.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
The Asian Japanese Rugby Cup, the AJRC. The Japan Times piece on that was fascinating.
Tell us about it.
Well, it's much more than just, guys playing rugby. It's become a vital piece of social infrastructure. Happens annually, brings together Japanese expats from all across Asia, different jobs, different backgrounds, different generations. It creates this real sense of community, of shared identity, completely outside the old company lines.
It's amazing, isn't it, how something like sport can step into that gap. It shows that even as the reasons for being abroad change, fewer corporate types, more wealthy individuals, maybe that fundamental need for connection, for community, it's still there.
Absolutely. It's like the community is rebuilding itself organically from the ground up.
Okay, so putting it all together, localization by companies, repatriation driven by costs, but also this rise of an affluent segment.
Yeah, if you look at the whole picture that emerges from these sources, Nikkei Asia, the Japan Times, South China Morning Post, it's definitely complex. It's not that simple story of head office sends employee overseas anymore. Not at all. It's this really nuanced mix of corporate decisions, economic realities, and increasingly individual choice and wealth.
So the big takeaway for you listening is really this dual reality. Japanese expatriation today, it's a blend. It's corporate localization strategy, meeting economic pressures, pushing people home, meeting strategic wealth migration, pulling a different group abroad, especially in Asia. The whole landscape is being remade.
Completely reinvented.
And that brings us to the final thought we wanted to leave you with, something to chew on. If this trend continues, fewer traditional corporate expats, more independent, high net worth individuals, how does that change the actual nature of the Japanese community abroad over, say, the next 10 years? Will shared economic status become the defining feature rather than a shared employer back in Japan? And what new ways of connecting, beyond the rugby pitch might emerge to replace those old corporate structures? What will that future community look like? Definitely something to think about. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.